The High Lords of Terra have been busy playing their games, but the Imperial Fists haven't taken their eye off the board. And leading that charge is Captain Slaughter. Today, we're going to be talking about building a lore-accurate Imperial Fists army based on the last time the Imperial Fists were really the Imperial Fists. And yes, 40k Imperial Fist players, you can come for me, because you know it's true. In the novel I Am Slaughter, the true Imperial Fists were lost. And it's one of my favorite 40k stories because it really envelops the entirety of the Grimdark universe to a point that you don't even really get to see in a lot of other 40k books. Because a lot of times the Imperium will still either triumph or survive. And in this novel, they don't. But it's also one of the best novels I've found for really finding what the true Imperial Fist would have looked like had they continued into 40k. Now they do actually still operate pretty similarly to this in current canon, but for this experiment, I wanted to do a lore-accurate, the way Dorn intended type Imperial Fist army. So let's dive into it. We're going to talk a little bit about the book first, and then we'll dive into the army.
The enemy attack at their peril.
So, for those of you who haven't read it, I Am Slaughter is the first book in the War of the Beast series. It is a really, really good story. It's written by one of my favorite Warhammer 40k authors, Dan Abnett, and he really nails a lot of the nuance that would have been taking place before the full stagnation of the Imperium, but you get to see how it really starts. You get to see the High Lords of Terra bickering and constantly backstabbing each other and even maneuvering entire Space Marine legions into a position where it will hurt a different High Lord. And in the end, it ends up costing the Imperium the Imperial Fists. And it's probably one of the best novels that does this. You get to see a lot of the big picture while still getting nuanced views of individual characters like Captain Slaughter or Daylight that are really, really good. You get to see Space Marines being the Space Marines you want them to be. They're heavily dedicated to duty. They're heavily focused on everything around them. And it's really, really fascinating to see it come to fruition in this novel. This was the reason I kind of wanted to do my first lore-accurate Imperial Fist list based on this novel. There's a lot of other really good Imperial Fist novels from what I've heard. I haven't read any of them yet. Besides the ones in the Heresy, there's a few really good ones in the Heresy, especially with Pollux and Sigismund. But I didn't want to use the Heresy for this. As we've talked about multiple times, I try and avoid using Heresy novels to create lore-accurate lists, because technically that was 10,000 years before this. If we were talking about actual Horus Heresy tabletop game, we would pull from the Horus Heresy books, which we still may do in the future. If you guys want to see that, let me know in the comments below. But for now, we're pulling from as close to 40k as we can get. In this case, this would be technically 36k, not 40k, when the War of the Beast happens. But it is still very accurate. A lot of the same things that are happening in 40k are happening in 36k. And a lot of the foundations of what's happening in 40k are being set up in 36k, where the High Lords of Terror are starting to question if Space Marines are even necessary and looking to pull more power away from them and disperse them throughout the galaxy to take them off of the minds of the average people, because it potentially causes them a lack of power and a lack of control. And this dichotomy is really, really fun to see on full display in this novel. But you also get to see exactly, like I said, how the Imperial Fists operate. This novel is definitely up in my favorites. I don't know how high it would be. After we do some of these lore-accurate lists, I may have to go back through the Loyalists and rank their books from top to bottom. I think number 1 will be a pretty obvious one, but several of the others may not be. But now that we've got that all out of the way, let's talk about the actual army and how I built it out and what it would look like.
Weapons at ready. It is time.
Okay, so now we've got the background in place, let's talk about this army that we have built to represent I Am Slaughter and the Imperial Fists. My favorite part of I Am Slaughter is it's one of the first times you get to see in chronological order the Space Marines breaking into specialty units. And instead of tactical teams that you see throughout the Horus Heresy, where you'll have one or two specialty Space Marines inside a tactical squad, now you're starting to see squads like the Eradicators, as well as aggressors directly called out. But let's lay the foundation and start talking about what this list will look like with the characters. First is a pretty obvious one when you're talking about the Imperial Fists. They love their Gravis armor. So the first thing I added was a captain in Gravis armor. The second will be an Apothecary Biologist, once again in Gravis armor. This one, because he now comes in the Heroes of the Chapter, I'll bring up the Stern Guard now. We do have Stern Guard in this list, 2 units of them. 1 unit will come with the Apothecary Biologist. On top of that, we have a Chaplain and Terminator armor. Terminators are pretty important to the Imperial Fist as well. They do like the bigger, bulkier units that can hold ground. Now, they do have some lighter units, but the vast majority of them that you see in I Am Slaughter are these heavier units. On top of that, we have a heavy intercessor squad. Or we have 2 heavy intercessor squads, one paired with the captain and one paired with the Apothecary Biologist as bodyguards and attachments to really drive home that firepower. We also have a single regular intercessor squad to kind of hold back lines and do some screening work. They're going to be a lot lighter than the rest of the force, but they're going to be very effective on that back line, which you actually do see in I Am Slaughter as well. You just see some of the regular intercessors working in the background to screen out some of the enemy and push them out while the bigger, heavier units control specific points along the lines. After the intercessors is the aggressor squad that we just mentioned earlier. They're going to be a little bit heavier hitting unit for sure. We also have 3 squads of Blade Guard. Blade Guard are extremely important to the Imperial Fists. It's part of their baseline culture, especially at this stage, where at least 4 have been standing vigil on the walls of Terra and go to save their brothers and really get to display their prowess with their blades. And in actually this case, it was usually a spear. And we'll talk about that when we get to the fluffy cost here later on. But it's going to be really fascinating to see the Blade Guard in this heavier unit list. I don't actually see it a ton with Imperial Fist lists, which surprises me, given how very dedicated Imperial Fists are to the blade. It's, like I said, it's a big part of their culture throughout the lore. So I would love to see more of that. And to be fair, I may just be playing against Imperial Fist players that don't really care about that part of the lore, but that's what I've seen. So I would love to see more of it. And I think in this case with this build, a Blade Guard would actually be extremely helpful to serve with the heavier units to do cleanup and control. But I may be wrong on that. So Imperial Fist players, if you're watching this and enjoying it, let me know in the comments below what you guys think and what types of units you guys think I missed in this list as well. So after the Blade Guard, we have the Eradicators that we mentioned earlier. They're going to be a pivotal part of this as well. On top of that, we have the Stern Guard Veteran Squad. There will be 2 of them. Like I mentioned, when you're buying it, the Apothecary Biologist is part of the Heroes of the Chapter box. That comes with a squad of Stern Guard. So you'll only need to buy 1 additional box of Stern Guard to go with this, but it'll be very effective for you on the tabletop and fits that heavy firepower type aesthetic and motif of the Imperial Fists. Now, we also have 2 Terminator squads to go along with this. Like I said, Terminators are a big part of the Imperial Fists as well. So making sure you field them is going to be pretty important on top of that. Now, the one thing that this list is missing is a lot of anti-tank. It will be a little bit difficult that way, but in order to fix this, I did include a Gladiator Lancer to give something that can punch pretty hard. I also included 2 Impulsors. These 2 Impulsors will be used to transport whichever units you please. I typically like them with Blade Guard, but that's because I'm a White Scars player. I like to have my Blade Guard drop off and pop out wherever and wreak havoc on backlines and on specific objectives throughout the game. It makes them a lot of fun, but I also don't think that's the way the Imperial Fist would play as much. You're probably more likely to use a Stern Guard in those to allow you to reposition and get some OC control and get prime firing positions through those impulsors. And finally, we do have a lot of Imperial Fist sprues. It's not as important when it comes to these units. The Imperial Fist sprues, they don't really have that unique of helmets. They don't really have that unique of shoulder pads or pauldrons. So you don't have to get those. I included them just to make sure you have them in the calculations. But if you wanted to drop them, I wouldn't be mad about it. Imperial Fists are very uniform in the way they look, and that's pretty much the way all Space Marines look, besides the paint colors. So I don't think you'd miss them if you wanted to drop them. Next, let's talk about how much this is all going to cost you, so that you can know how you're going to be approaching your Imperial Fist build.
Consolidating position on the objective.
Okay, so now that we've talked about what units will actually make up the composition of this army, let's talk about what this is going to cost you to build, because Warhammer 40k armies are not cheap. Now, in order to keep these numbers as close to accurate, I did not include anything like combo boxes or any type of specials or sales that are not easily repeatable. My goal is to give you a number that you can plan on and be very, very close. Obviously, taxes may vary, shipping may vary a little bit, and if you're in Australia, I'm sorry. I looked up some of the costs of Warhammer 40k stuff there. It is incredibly expensive. Here in the United States, it's not too bad, but I do sometimes wish I was in the UK to go buy a lot of this for considerably cheaper. But these numbers will be based on, obviously, US dollars. First, we do the retail cost, which is based on Warhammer.com. So let's talk about that first. On Warhammer.com, if you were to build this piecemeal, so buying each unit separately, or in this case, because you have the Heroes of the Chapter box, technically 2 of your units will be combined, it's going to run you $1,353. Now, there are a lot of ways to save money on this. Next, we're going to talk about the value cost. The value cost we still did piecemeal, but I used Wargame Portal and Amazon to get these numbers. I have a sneaking suspicion that if you put in a little bit of work and tried to find these separately, you probably could find the vast majority of this build for considerably cheaper, either secondhand or through your local game store or through combo boxes. Like the Leviathan box actually covers about half of this, maybe a little less. So going that route will save you more money than just the value cost. The value cost is the high end of what it would cost you to build going one box at a time from Wargame Portal or Amazon. And that total is going to be $1,150.04. So a pretty significant savings of about $200 just off of going from Warhammer.com to these value retailers. So I absolutely do recommend them. I am not sponsored by them. I would love to be someday. But for now, I'm just going off of it because that's where I go to buy my stuff. If I can't find it in my LGS, I will next search Wargame Portal and Amazon. Amazon tends to be slightly more expensive, but you also get free shipping and it's fast, usually. Wargame Portal, I believe you get free shipping over a certain dollar value. It's been a while since I've actually looked. And they will be cheaper than Amazon most of the time. So I always look on there and try and save myself a little bit of money. Now, because we are doing I Am Slaughter, we have some very unique situations that we have going for us. The Imperial Fists in this book and the Imperial Fists in 40k do not look the same. Because as we know from a lot of the lore and the War of the Beast series and several other places, the Imperial Fists had to be rebuilt after this battle in order to keep them alive. And this was done by bringing in Geed Seed from the rest of the successor chapters. But that also means a lot of the traditions and things like that came from the successor chapters back to the Imperial Fists. So a lot of the base structures and looks and feels of the Imperial Fists were lost, unfortunately. So if we want to reflect that, we're going to do something that I like to call the fluffy cost. The fluffy cost is where we look for either third-party or other game models that would fill this missing void and bring back a lot of the original flair that you see with the Imperial Fists in the Horus Heresy. So there's a lot of really good Horus Heresy models that I think really bring this back, including replacing the Captain and Gravis armor with the Legion Praetor. The Legion Praetor has that Gravis feel to him already, but he just has so much more character than a standard Gravis Captain, and I think it's an easy win there. It's not going to cost you too much more to go that route versus just standard. The next one I would replace is the Heavy Intercessor Squad. I would use, there's a unit called the Breacher Siege Squad in Horus Heresy. That is one of the most Imperial Fist coded units that I have ever seen, and I think it would be a mistake to not use them in place of the Heavy Intercessors. Technically, you could replace the Intercessors with them as well. That would be your call. I feel like they play more with the Heavy Intercessors, just style and feel and appearance. So that would be who I would replace. Now, the next would be at least one of the Blade Guard veteran squads I would replace with a Legion Command Squad. This gives you a lot more of this unique feel and characteristics that you don't really get with the Blade Guard in 40k. Don't get me wrong, some of my favorite individual Space Marine models that are generic Space Marines are actually Blade Guard. I love their look, but you can get more of an Imperial Fist feel by going with the Legion Command Squad. I said don't replace all of your Blade Guard that way. I would replace at least one of the units, though. Next, there's a Decurion edition, so technically not a replacement. Adding the Decurion to the top just gives a guy sitting on top pointing a heavy bolter. It won't actually affect the gameplay at all, but it just gives it a little bit better feel than you get with the current Gladiator Lancer. You can also do this with the Impulsors. That is your call as well. So once you're done zhuzhing everything up, there is one bit of kit that you can get for the 30k Imperial Fist that I think is actually worth it. And honestly, if I were to get any of the accessory sprues, this is the one I would get, and that's the Phalanx Warders kit. It has a lot of very unique, very Imperial Fist things that the 40k version I don't think really does. So I would get those instead of the 40k accessory sprues to really bring your army to life. And if you do that, your total cost is going to be $1,498.34. Yes, it's going to cost you more, but your army is going to look so much cooler. It's going to do a lot of really cool things to the aesthetic of your army, and it's going to feel very Imperial Fist coded. And that, I think, is worth the extra money. But that's your call to make. So now that we've talked about how much this is going to cost, let's talk about painting it and making it look the way it should. This is going to be a little bit of a hard one. I am not the best one to teach it, but we will definitely talk about that when we get there.
Consolidating position on the objective.
Okay, now that you have your army ready to go, you've purchased it, you've seen its cost, let's talk about how to paint it. So the first answer is, don't ask me. Painting yellow is extremely hard, and it's not one that I've actually done. So I'm going to pop up a little tag right here to Tabletop Ready. They have a spectacular video on how to paint Imperial Fists. A lot of the techniques I've learned on how to paint them either comes from them or from the Kieran show or a few others that I really enjoy. But their aesthetic seems pretty simple. It's always bright yellow with gold accents, black accents, and sometimes red, depending on which unit you're in. The ring around their pauldrons in the Imperial Fist tells you which company they're with so that they can be easily identified. You'll want to keep that pretty uniform because your units on the tabletop should be from the same company mostly. But it is both easy and extremely hard. So I would definitely recommend either the Tabletop Ready video or one of the other spectacular videos that I think you guys will enjoy in getting this army ready. Basing wise, if you're going directly off of I Am Slaughter, There is multiple references to it being a very red dirt planet, along with a lot of gray rock. It's kind of a unique build that way. Typically, you don't have red dirt and gray rock typically together. They usually are pretty separate, but that's what it would look like in I Am Slaughter based on the description from Dan Abnett. So if that's how you're wanting to base it, I definitely would. Now that we have the painting and basing out of the way, let's just talk about the final details on how I would play this, the detachment, which I think should be pretty obvious, and a few other things like that.
Weapons at ready. It is time.
Okay, so now that you've got your army painted and ready for the tabletop, let's talk about the basics of the list. Once again, you can see this list through the link in the description below. I also have a link to the actual cost list where you can see how much it would cost to build this army in a little bit more detail if you have questions. Feel free to reach out to me on the comments if you do have any questions or if you have any suggestions for units or factions that you would like me to cover on these lore accurate lists. I always look forward to them. We do have the Raven Guard coming up here in a few weeks, and that will cover all 9 of the primary legions that are loyalist. There are some other ones that I would love to do down the road, as well as the traders and groups like the Black Templars and a few things like that. But for now, that will wrap up at least the first part of this huge series that we've got going. Now, when you bring the Imperial Fists to the tabletop, there's pretty much only one really good answer for a detachment. That's the Anvil Siege Force. The Imperial Fist can run other things, but having heavy weapons be even more powerful is just how the Imperial Fists work. It's what you should expect to have go on, and it's what you really need to have for this type of build to work well. The Imperial Fists will play pretty simply as well. They will take and they will hold an objective, and they will fortify it and take up positions to really drive everything forward and hit as hard as humanly possible. So it's a pretty easy on the tabletop play. I know there's a lot of nuance to them as well, but honestly, with a lot of these, just getting it onto the tabletop and feeling it out is probably going to be your best bet. Now, if we have any Imperial Fist players that are watching this, once again, please let me know in the comments below, and let me know if you think I missed anything or if there's any other suggestions you'd have to people considering an Imperial Fist army. I look forward to your comments, and I will see you guys next time.